Hello, and thank you for watching this midday weather outlook for the southern region brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I want to start off today's discussion going into the tropics because now that we're midway through the month of July, we're starting to get into that time period of the year where the tropics really start to crank up. We do know already that the ocean temperatures that come in the main development region, and again, when I say that, I'm talking about this area, main development region. It's off the coast of Africa where these waves, these tropical waves, this is not in the ocean but in the atmosphere, come off of Africa and kind of give us some low-level surface convergence. That's where air gathers near the surface and begins to rise. That is how our hurricanes are basically born off of the coast of Africa. Well, if we take off all that drawing there and just come back to it, we do see that there's a significant portion of the main development region, then getting over to the Caribbean, which is here, and the Gulf of Mexico, which is there, where the ocean temperatures are quite warm at this point. We still have our struggling La Nina going on over here, and we need to be talking about what's going on there and with the fact that the Madden-Julian oscillation is finally moving a little bit away from its standing wave over Africa now into the Indian Ocean. It's very slow, but it is trying to move in that direction. So when we think about what really controls the strength of a hurricane, it honestly boils down to a few broad parameters. Now, there's details in this, but I'm just giving you some of the bigger points. Wind shear is critical. High wind shear environments shut hurricanes down, spread out the heating, disrupt the vortex, introduce dry air. Secondly, dry air. If the Saharan air layer, if the mid-levels of the atmosphere are dry, right in through this area, it can really shut down convection. Another thing that can do that is just kind of the overall, I don't know a better way to describe it, but the breathing of the atmosphere, where you have rising motion in one place, for example, over the Indian Ocean or Pacific, you have to have sinking air over somewhere else, and it can sometimes suppress convection from the top. And of course, we have ocean temperatures, which ultimately determine how strong these things are. So if we take a look at our tropical Atlantic, so this is the whole of the main development region into the Western Basin, getting into, the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico. We have seen lately as that standing wave set up over Africa an increase in wind shear. So what we're looking at here is this would be the average value of the wind shear as we go through the hurricane season. One of the reasons, there's multiple, but one of the reasons why hurricane season is when it is because this is normally a time of year where we have the least amount of wind shear, okay? The big reason is the ocean temperatures. But if you notice, recently, since the beginning of July, we've really taken wind shear values back up above average. So it's been quite windy across the main tropical Atlantic. Secondly, it's been dry. Now, this is just a snapshot out to Monday. I just chose Monday just to kind of give you an idea. And what we see here is there's a lot of these large pockets of very, very low relative humidity air that's in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. So think of that as just something against which any tropical development has to work against. Now, we get waves of the drier air, but we've seen quite a bit of it lately. And one last thing I want to point out to you, can you see how, now this is just Monday, but you see how the high pressure cell for the subtropics is way over here and it kind of extends, but if I kind of just draw a few lines around those isobars, it's way out in the open ocean. It's not tucked away near the U.S. coast. And that's going to be critical for the upcoming seasonal forecast as well. So over the next 5 days, the National Hurricane Center isn't watching much. And even if we go out days 7 through 10, I was keeping an eye on some tropical thunderstorm development around the Lesser Antilles that may move over parts of Cuba, maybe into parts of the Bahamas or the island of Hispaniola. I don't know, but right now this is the probability of even a tropical depression forming. And if you look, these colors are way down here. So I would say that in the near term, there isn't much that we need to be watching as we progress through the end of the month of July. And there's just a lot going on here that's kind of suppressing this activity. But we just got released last night the new long-range outlook from the European model. So this is a 46-day, goes way out to the end of August, but a 46-day precipitation anomaly map. And what we continue to see is that the European model wants to keep that region inside that wedge I drew there wet. That means a lot of active thunderstorm development. We also see it right in through here, but notice this drier patch that's setting up in this area. I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments. So as we move our way toward the month of August, because remember, August, September, October, that's kind of the key months for tropical development, it appears that the model wants to keep the subtropical high sitting somewhere over here. Not over here, and certainly not tucked too far away over toward Europe, but somewhere where it normally is out in the central bit of the Atlantic Ocean, but really kind of cranking up the potential here for tropical thunderstorm development. Now, when I see that, the displacement for me is interesting because I would expect that if we had these same anomalies farther to the north, that would be critical moving into this upcoming hurricane season as really heightening my worry about the activity. But we have a very dynamic situation setting up here when you combine all the variables we just began discussing. And again, I want to show you where that high pressure cell is sitting. It's right here, okay? So if this is in fact where the climatological high is going to reside, then that means we're going to watch a storm track where we could have several systems that, because of the position at that high, may skirt along the East Coast like this. And it kind of leaves a big question mark as to what could be developing in the Gulf of Mexico, and will these systems be pushed far enough toward the U.S. coastline? So it's just a lot of uncertainty, but I wanted to give you our latest kind of update on what's going on in the tropics. Now, if we look in the near term, this is just the next week's worth of precipitation. We can see that so much of our southern region is looking like it is going to be very dry. You can see right in through here, parts of Texas, Oklahoma, getting over to the Delta, looking very dry. But you notice, well, there is appears to be quite a bit of precipitation that's skirting down here in the Gulf of Mexico, and then also in this area, and then coming around the periphery like this over toward the Appalachian Mountains. With the active Canadian storm track, these little weak fronts try to come down here, but turns out that first, almost oval shape I drew is because we're going to be seeing a broad ridge stretching across this area in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's going to be very stagnant, and the flow around it is going to go in this direction. So what ends up happening is, without any strong upper level winds, all that we're going to be able to get from central Texas all the way over to Georgia as we look out not only for the next week, but even into maybe even a little bit into week 2, is going to just be storms that pop up on the day's heat. The southwestern monsoon is really going here. We can see that. And I do want to let you know that should any of these storms get over the mountains and start to form over here in parts of eastern Colorado, they could continue to kind of pull around into parts of western Kansas, the Panhandle region, and so we're going to watch out for that. And of course, that could be some critical area for cotton, sorghum, and other crops that are grown there. Plus, that's our primary wheat belt. So I wanted to give you those details here, and I want to talk to you about why I see this happening. So I'm not going to go to this Saturday, but next Saturday. You can still see the influence of that broader ridge sitting in place. So the jet stream, overall the flow, is way up here in Canada. And this large upper level ridge that's sitting here over, Little Rock, for example. Now remember, this is upper level. This isn't a surface high pressure system. This is upper level. This is just keeping the flow on the south side out of this direction. Southwestern monsoon curls around it, and then the action's around the northern side. So we get this almost ring of fire type setup around this, but only pop-up storms in underneath it. And like I said, see what the jet stream is? It's way up here, and it's cranking away through the Canadian prairies. And we just, in general, have very stagnant, weak upper-level flow conditions. Now, again, this is way up high in the sky here. We're at 200 millibars, so we're up there where, commercial aircraft fly, okay? So what we see here is just that high. It sits right there, okay? Now, the good news about all of this is the subtropical high that is out over the open Atlantic seems to be dominating the overall flow. And given that we don't have this highly amplified situation where the ridge is doing something like that, whereas remember it's more like this, the upper level flow is, we are tending to get some higher pressure in here, but still we're going to get transport of moisture in the low levels out of the Gulf, which is why we're going to have moisture on which to get these storms to pop as we look out here toward the end of the month of July. And speaking of the end of July, this will be the last flow pattern we'll see at the end of the month. This is valid July 31st. And one of the things that the models continue to do toward the end of July is want to back that ridge up and really set it up here over parts of, the Four Corners states. And if that happens, we'll end up getting northwest flow that comes through the Corn Belt, and it will send possibly rounds of storms that come all the way down to parts of the Appalachian Mountains, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. So we're going to have to watch out for that. My big question mark remains for parts of Texas. How dry are we? And do pop-up storms come through and save the day? And what do those temperatures look like as well? So before we get to that temperature discussion, let's go take a look at what the European model is putting out for us here. So let's pause it there and step back and kind of watch things evolve. Here we are getting into Friday afternoon and evening and getting into the overnight hours. So you can see that along the weak frontal boundary sitting here, scattered storms from Missouri over to North Carolina and Virginia, and also right along the coast, and then just daily convection down here in parts of Florida. But do notice, we don't have a big area of stagnant high pressure here. The high pressure cell's off the coast. So the isobars, if you just follow them with me, they're kind of running north-south, which means Gulf of Mexico moisture transport. Overnight hours on Friday, now getting into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening. And what we continue to see here is along the Gulf, could see some storms popping up here on the ocean breeze that shows up. And we're going to watch right into the Appalachian Mountains, possibly for some storms on Saturday evening. Working our way into Sunday, we see much of the same, right? You can see the flow coming around here, hit or miss storms underneath this, but really disorganized, stagnant flow. The isobars are really far apart, meaning weak winds. So we're just going to have to watch to see if storms pop at all on this. We are watching, let me step you back here. We're watching on Monday a front that's going to try to get through the Corn Belt, but because of that large ridge in the upper levels, it stops right there. It doesn't keep pushing farther to the south. So as I go forward into Monday night, again, when the greens show up, it's just scattered convection, scattered storms. This is now getting into Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon and evening. And what do you see? The same thing. Your best chances of rainfall from Texas to the Carolinas is really going to be scattered storms throughout the next 5 to 7 days. Now, what we're noticing as we get out here toward the end of this time period, this would be next Wednesday night getting into Thursday morning. Now with high pressure trying to build into this area of the Great Lakes, we are seeing better flow. Like I said, remember it's coming in the upper levels like this, better flow into the Appalachian Mountains. So Tennessee, Kentucky, better chances for storms middle and end of next week. But outside of that, it's just a lot of hit or miss. See it? Just pops up on the heat of the day right there. See it? Sorry, I went too fast. And that's what we tend to be getting. But we are hopeful that by the time the ridge begins to shove to the west, that we do bring better flow into southern Texas where it has been extremely dry. But the monsoon, look at it going as that ridge shoves west. It's really going to start cranking up there. Okay, looking exclusively into week 2. The European model, do notice over there on the right, while it does keep this whole area on the drier side of things, it seems to be producing more possibility for storms than the GFS is doing right now, which is really carrying a bit more of a dry bias through this whole area. Both models are really wanting to push hard on the southwestern monsoon, which you can see here pretty clearly. And the wet that you see in the Gulf does encroach in on the Gulf Coast region, but it's going to have a hard time moving much farther inland, and it's probably going to blow up as a lot of coastal storms, which we're very used to seeing showing up on the sea breeze, right? If we look at temperatures from this point forward, let's just kind of walk through the next few days here. Remember, the numbers represent the actual high temperatures forecast by the National Digital Forecast Database, and the colors tell you differences from normal. So today's a scorcher. Well, gosh, across much of the United States here, we're going to be getting temperatures in the hundreds in the Central Plains, deep into the 90s in the Southeast, and it extends clear up to the Northern Plains as well. Playing forward from here, let's see how things transition as we get into Saturday. What we end up noticing, again, much above average temperatures here in and around Dallas, still looking at mid-90s, which is right about average, but above average Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia as well. So this is getting into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We just see a lot of mid-90s across much of our southern region with just some daily scattered storms kind of calming things down a little bit. And if there's high heat, it's western Texas getting up through the central part of the plains here. That seems to be where the highest heat tends to reside. Looking out beyond that, this is now day 6 through 10 from the GFS. Got the same thing over here from the European model. I got similar patterns. The models are kind of locked in on the heat, above average temperatures for most of the eastern 2/3 of the United States, even getting up the Canadian prairies. So of course that includes the what's going on down here in the southern region. You see normal temperatures here. Well, again, if that ridge is setting up and we're bringing in flow like this, we could get some better cloud cover here and maybe some precipitation. I'm saying maybe because it's going to be hard to overcome the fact that the last 3 weeks have been very dry in southern and southeastern Texas. As we look out here toward the end of the month and the beginning of the new month, we certainly see that much of the southern region is near average to above average in temperatures. It looks like it's going to be a hot rest of July and getting into August. So speaking of August, this is what I've got. Brand new European Weeklies just came out, and what we notice here overall is that they've continued with their warmer bias across much of the United States, except for in this area here, but this certainly includes the southern region. And look over there at the precipitation. Now, I'm going to tell you something. In terms of the ability for our weather models to predict precipitation throughout any time of the year, summer is by far the worst, and this is the peak of summer, right? So I will just tell you, when you see this and you see, oh, there's patchy browns in there with some greens, the model is not going to be able to hone in on exactly who's going to get the pop-up storms of the day. So I think what we all need to watch is, does the ridge stay over the delta, or does it actually back up to the west? Those are some of the big questions I'm going to be trying to answer, because it will be very important for what happens, not only coming out of the tropics as we get into August, but also what it means in terms of just our daily temperature and precipitation patterns moving forward. But final point, we are just in a stagnant, I could call it normal, hot summer type setup. So just be prepared. It's going to pop with storms in some places, and it's just going to be weak upper level flow, so they're not going to go anywhere really. Just pop up and kind of fall back in on themselves. So watch out for that, all right? Okay, thanks for giving me your time this week. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll give you some new updates next week, all right? Thank you.